Welcome, Foot Clan Nation, Fantasy Footballers DFS podcast for you guys, DFS for the rest of us. As a reminder, first of all, Joe Holka, Chris Meany, Jake Seeley with you guys as always. We're following Joe Holka at Joe Holka, Chris Meany's at Chris Meany. They make it easy for you. I'm at All In Kid. But the other reminder I was going to say, if you still haven't signed up for the DFS, maybe you're just coming in the middle of the season. Maybe your season-long teams are frustrating you, and it's like, hey, it's time for DFS because I'm 1-8 or 1-7, whatever the record should be at this point, 1-7. Anyway, podcast 10% off, get you in there. That's where Chris's articles are, my articles are, all the advice, podcasts, tons of stuff for you. So we'll get ready for week 9, but real quick in week 8, Chris, are you ever going to join our group? Because I won again, but I'm assuming your score wasn't good enough.
Yeah, I had Corey Davis. It did not work out for me. Matthew Stafford to Kenny Galladay. That was really nice. But yeah, I don't know what's going on with that contest. I know I shot you guys a message. I'm not figuring out the FanDuel invites, but promised to get in because I got a heck of a lineup today.
I was waiting for you to chime in, Joe. I thought
you were going to kind of take the wheel there. I didn't want to get too on Chris for this whole thing. I was going to let you be bad cop today, and I'll be good cop. Chris, you know what? We're going to get you in this week. It's all going to be okay, and then you'll probably beat both of us.
That's right. I'm due for a dub.
Yeah. Chris just doesn't want to be embarrassed. That's what it is.
Yeah. It is what it is. Let's be honest. Yeah. I mean,
I'm actually looking right now. What was it? 150? I don't even know what. Oh yeah. See, I stomped Joe. That's why he doesn't want to say anything.
That might be part of it.
Let's talk week 9. Let's get ready for it. So let's just jump right into cash lineups as always.
Straight cash, homie.
All right, let's start with running back. Joe, you can go first since you want to be nice cop, or is it good cop? Nice cop.
Nice cop.
That's the other guy. That's the guy that's the Canadian version, Chris.
Yeah. I feel like
want some donuts with that. There you go. All right.
You're just kicking running back to me since Christian McCaffrey's back on the main slate, or what?
Well, no. I legitimately. Well, that's part of the reason, but there's twofold here, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Is because if you're looking at DraftKings, this is now. We joked about it for a few weeks. This is Russell Westbrook territory where it's very hard to get a lineup, especially on DraftKings, with Christian McCaffrey or Dalvin Cook in it.
I think one thing that's really changed this week, and in particular, I mean, just in comparison to other weeks, it seems like they really scaled up some prices based on like kind of less games on the slate. Even some of the value guys, like I don't really love anyone under 4K this week. Even like it's really tough. So McCaffrey, like you said, he's 10K. I think a lot of people are going to struggle to click him, which just makes me want to find a way to play him. But even like at the quarterback position, like some of these guys are really priced up as well. A couple of the wide receivers, like Chris was mentioning Kenny Galladay before. I'm sure we'll get into that, but his price is extremely elevated relative to where it has been most of the season. So it's going to be a tougher week, especially if we don't get any value kind of opening up. But that said, I'm still going to probably do everything I can to get McCaffrey in my lineup. I get that it's a tough matchup. Tennessee second against running backs on the ground. They are a team that can be beat through the air, though, as far as the short areas of the field. So I like McCaffrey quite a bit. I'm projecting him for almost 30 touches, so it's really hard for me to get away from a guy like that, even at his elevated price tag. And if I get a discount on ownership just because no one wants to click him, I'll be happy with that.
Yeah, and I'm sure you will, because I would imagine, Joe, that's going to be the mindset of most people at 10K. And Jake, you're dead on with the Russell Westbrook thing. And I wonder where this price is going to get to in a couple of weeks if he keeps touching the ball 30 times. It's really hard to fade him in cash. You're not going to have a balanced lineup when you roll him out. So, I mean, even just saving the $500 on DK with Dalvin Cook it goes a long way, because this is a weird week. I mean, you got Monday Night Football with Barkley and Zeke. I mean, you got all the Patriots running backs, on Sunday Night Football, and San Fran been rolling with some of their running backs on Thursday Night Football. And then, not even to mention the wide receivers, all the wide receivers that are off the slate with the Rams and the Saints and the Falcons on bye. So it's an interesting week from the main slate standpoint. But McCaffrey, if you can find a way to get him in, sure. But for me, Cook is 100% locked in. I would imagine he'll be the most owned player this week.
Dalvin Cook is highest projected ownership right now. Christian McCaffrey, though, is still second right behind him.
People are excited, man. People are excited to play this guy again, I think.
Yeah, tough to
fade. Who? McCaffrey?
We haven't had him on the main slate in a while, it feels like. Well, I guess last week we had him, but it was just like against San Francisco, and a lot of people just X'd him out of their pool.
We'll talk about it. I could not get him into my DraftKings lineup, even with two things I think I was pretty not quite crazy about, but we'll talk about because we haven't gotten to those positions. That is a little sneak preview. Sure. Like wide receivers, all 5K guys, but we're still talking running backs. Number 3, ownership, Joe. It shouldn't be a surprise for who he's facing. However, his quarterback in this offense have been abysmal, and including the head coach, who is taking this offense that he wanted to be more aggressive and has created one of the slowest paced offenses in the league and the least amount of plays, as he always does. That's Adam Gase and that's Le'Veon Bell, but he's facing the Dolphins.
It's a great spot, 7,700 for this guy. I think he's one of those ones that in between him and Nick Chubb, I think that a lot of people might kind of take the savings there with Chubb, but it's a really interesting one. I think that the spot shapes up, really well. It couldn't be much better from a matchup perspective. 31st against running backs on the ground, 32nd against running backs through the air. If we do get the volume from Le'Veon Bell, we haven't gotten a ton of efficiency from him this year, of course, but I do think that he's a guy that if you did want to kind of build around and you didn't want to get all the way up to McCaffrey, or maybe you've already locked in Dalvin Cook like it sounds like Chris is on, I'd be in on Le'Veon Bell this week. I thought that he was a decent tournament play even last week. They're on the road, tough team total, but the touches should be there.
Yeah, Bell's completely frustrating, and it's not even him. It's Adam Gase. He wants to make things easier for his quarterback. Why don't you just hand it off to Lev Bell? I said this to you earlier in the week, Jake, on the throwback. There's no excuse for Lev Bell to get 8 carries. What the heck is happening? 8 carries? Are you kidding me? 7 picks in the last 2 games for Sam Darnold. Hand it off. The matchup is great, like Joe said. They've allowed the 2nd most rushing yards, the 3rd most fantasy points. On DK, he's priced up like he should have a game. On FanDuel, if you're a player over there, he's not priced up that way. He's $7K. Josh Jacobs, James Conner, Jones, Chubb, Carson, all those guys are more expensive than Lev Bell. So it's easier to get him in over there. You're not going to get the full point for a catch, but that's the difference between the two sites. But I'm going back to him. I won't do it in cash though. I just can't. I've been burned too many times from him. So he's just a tournament play for me.
Well, here's 2 more I want to throw at you. So Joe brought up Nick Chubb. Right in between Le'Veon Bell and Nick Chubb is Josh Jacobs. There's the one right there. So Josh Jacobs, and then 2 right behind Nick Chubb, which is, I think people are making assumptions, obviously. But if James Conner is out, Jalen Samuels is just we joke about the free square cliche all the time, but you pretty much have to plug in Jalen Samuels, right? That's your savings. Joe talked about things opening up. That's something opening up right there.
That's the path for sure. Go ahead, Chris.
No, yeah, that's it. Not a whole lot to say besides that. If Connor doesn't play, it's going to be Jalen Samuels. He's already good to go. He practiced in full last week. I thought he was going to play Monday night against Miami, but he didn't. And he's been involved through the air as well. We haven't seen him get a ton of carries. He's only had 10. Is the most he's had. But in that game, he caught all 8 of his targets. So yeah, I think he's $5K over on FanDuel too. I think he's again, like you said, pretty much a free square because there's not a lot of value, really.
It seems like a week 2 where the matchups are better for some of these volume backs than we had last week at least. Take McCaffrey out of it against Tennessee. We've got a couple really poor defenses against the run at the top for some of these guys. Like you mentioned Dalvin Cook before. We talked about Le'Veon, but I would put Samuel right in there against Indy if we were to kind of get that. I think it'd be a tougher spot for him to kind of go off through the air, but if he gets a decent amount of carries, I think at 4K he'd be one of those guys that you would just have to lock in and move on.
What about going back up to Josh Jacobs? Does the injury concern you at all, or as long as he rolls out there and practice on Friday, you're good to go?
Yeah, he's someone that he's 6,500, right? So there's all these other guys for just a little bit more expensive. Where I'm a lot more, concerned with still Josh Jacobs' role through the air. I know that he's been a little bit more involved. He's shown some ceiling. I don't know, the projections that I'm kind of leaning on, it's still in this range. It's him, Adrian Peterson, Derrick Henry are the ones that just aren't seeing enough involvement through the air for me to strongly consider them in single entry. In tournaments, if you really needed to get that extra 1K in salary or so off of a guy like Chubb or a guy like Le'Veon Bell, I think he's fine. I don't think he's going to be in my top tier this week, though.
Yeah, Henry's interesting because, we're talking about rush DVOA with Football Outsiders, dead last, 135 rushing yards per game. Henry, since Ryan Tannehill has come in, he hasn't been just running into walls. He's got 165 rushing yards and 38 carries. But that's the one problem, Joe said it perfectly, is that he's not really involved through the air. And I understand that's why his price on DK is $5,700. But it is that still does kind of scream value to me. And over on FanDuel he's a little bit more expensive, $6,800, but if you're just looking for a back in terms of just safety, like Henry, Mack, these are guys that touch the ball about 20 times a game. They're just not that involved through the air.
All right, last one. We didn't talk unless you kind of threw his name in there and I missed it along the mix. I'm not talking about you, Chris. I'm talking about either one of you. I didn't hear his name, but I find it interesting because I'm usually the one that complains about Jamal Williams being involved. But how are more people not on Aaron Jones?
Great spot.
I don't get it.
Yeah,
Great spot.
Yeah, great spot. 28 catches his last 5 games too. I don't even care if Devante Adams comes back. I think he's still going to be involved through the air. Yeah, he's got 11 touchdowns. In his last 7 games. He's been such a beast. It's hard to fade him as well.
I'm with you.
So, all right.
You guys have any concerns with pace in that game before we move on, though? I think that Green Bay, that Chargers team is just moving at like a snail's pace right now, and I guess it's still not something that would just completely get us off Aaron Jones. Like, I'm with you guys. Like, his volume through the air has been fantastic. I think he's a really talented guy. Matchup's great. It's just he's going to have to do it, I think, with a little more efficiency than some of these other guys, but that's something we've seen from Aaron Jones in the past, so it could happen.
Yeah, and that's the upside of Aaron Jones is the efficiency. So, all right, let's talk wide receivers then. Let me ask you this question, Joe. Have we gotten to the point with the Buccaneers that neither one of them ever feel good in cash now? Like, because it's just, hey, it's Evans week. Hey, it's Godwin week. But this could be the week where it's both of them, right?
It's terrifying for cash games. Like, I don't play a ton of cash games. You guys know that. But even like last week, we're trying to figure out what guy to bring back in our Tennessee stacks. Like, for me, it was Evans. He was the guy that I think offered a little bit more upside, maybe a little bit more regression coming from his air yard profile. But yeah, like, it's basically if you pick the wrong one at the same price, like, your lineup was completely different, and I think that could continue to happen. We've seen it a bunch of times this year. It scares me to get all the way up there and really just have to kind of flip a coin at that point. And they're really expensive this week. Like, Kakamot guys have been priced up. They're both well over 7K. They're over 8K on FanDuel as well. So both of those guys in this spot might be tough to get to this week.
All right, before Chris, you go. Then who's your top one that you're looking at right now, Joe?
I still think it's Evans for me. I think that the target share that he's seeing with the deeper targets, but like honestly, a lot of the metrics that I really valued, they're like very close. I think that you could maybe give Godwin a slight edge in like something like yards per route run, but it's really splitting hairs at that point. More often than not in these situations, you would just say play both of them in GPPs, but it's been a weird situation in Tampa Bay where like neither one has been, or both of them have not been getting there in the same game. So I think it's still Evans for me. One thing that I think is interesting is people are getting a little bit smarter. I heard a couple of people mention this early in the week, but like normally people would be getting off of these like Marvin Jones type plays or and really like if they had a big week before, it might actually be good to go back to them because people are just jumping off that train right away. They never used to do that. People are attacking the guy that has like the regression coming. Like the Galladay play last week, he was 30% owned in the Millie Maker after having a couple poor weeks, and Marvin Jones is going up. People are getting smarter, so it's almost like we need to go the other way now, or maybe I'm overthinking that.
Interesting. If I had to pick the two, I think I would go Evans as well. It's a little bit easier to get them in on DK, and Joe alluded to it on FanDuel. They're 1 and 2 in terms of pricing. I mean, they're both top 5 wideouts. We know that Tampa Bay's secondary is awful, and Jameis Winston's going to have to throw the ball. They don't even have a run game. So, I mean, I think I would pick Evans, but I have no problem with just a Tampa stack. Like Godwin, Evans, and Jameis. I know it hasn't really happened with both of them, but Jake, you said it. It could be this week against Seattle, and it's just a tournament play. But I think I'm just going to avoid both of them in cash, and I'm sticking with the same game. And just roll out Tyler Lockett. He's a little bit safer. I know what's happening with Tyler Lockett and Russell Wilson every week, basically.
All right. Well, since we're still with you, then who else are you going with besides Tyler Lockett? And then I want to get Joe's take on Tyler Lockett.
Yeah. Well, I do like that Oakland and Detroit game. Kenny Galladay again. He is pretty expensive, but he's hit the century mark in 2 of his last 3 games. I mean, this total is up over 50. Both teams really struggling against the pass. So. Kenny Galladay, Marvin Jones, you can go back to Marvin Jones as well. So sticking in that game, that's a game I really want to attack. And then, with some KC wideouts as well, or not KC, with some Minnesota wideouts as well. Stephon Diggs. I'm not going up to the top with Adam Thielen, but I will spend some money on Stephon Diggs.
Diggs is a guy that I like quite a bit too this week. He's second in weighted opportunity rating behind Terry McLaurin. I like that quite a bit for him in the spot against KC. I think I'm with you on Lockett. I think that he's probably a little bit too expensive. I almost always kind of struggle with this guy anyway, and if I was really considering someone, it's probably DK Metcalf again. 5,700. This price is getting away from us a little bit, but I still think there could be some regression, a positive regression coming for DK Metcalf. Last week he didn't see a ton of work, but that usage that he sees and that role that he has in the red zone is definitely real. And for a guy that like Russell Wilson, who is very efficient, I think that we can target those guys even more than some of the other red zone guys that we have around the league.
Was there anybody else you're looking at wide receiver wise?
There's a couple guys. I hate to even bring him up at this point because he's failed us a couple weeks in a row, but Mike Williams still profiling as one of the guys that's underpriced. I mentioned that I have concerns with pace in this game, but I would feel bad if I didn't bring him up. If you can't go back there, I think that Curtis Samuel at 4,300 is one of the guys that I'm kind of locked in. As far as this week, he's top 10 in weighted opportunity rating. I do think that in this matchup, he sets up to have a pretty decent game. He kind of can attack this secondary where Tennessee can be beat. So I like the idea of going to Curtis Samuel. I think you can play him and McCaffrey together and not have to roll out the quarterback. But I think that Samuel, if you can't go back to Mike Williams, would make a lot of sense this week too.
Yeah, there's a couple of usual suspects. I mean, John Brown, we seem to bring up every single week.
Well, you do.
Yeah, I mean, 4 catches in every game so far this year, 5 catches in 4 straight. I mean, Washington's coughed up the 6th most fantasy points to wide receivers. I mean, he's in that price range where he's not too expensive. He's not a value. He's just okay if you're looking at that 6K range. And then another guy, I don't think we've really talked about him enough. I think it's because Mitch Trubisky just stinks. But Allen Robinson has been also pretty consistent this year as well. I mean, at least 7 targets and 4 grabs in every game, 15 catches in his last 2, 5 catches in 5 straight games. We know about the Eagles secondary. We know about the struggles that the run game, with Chicago and going up against that Eagles run defense as well. So, I mean, 32 targets in his last 3 games. He's definitely a value on DK.
Yeah, I was waiting for Allen Robinson to be brought up because I think it's a great one, honestly. I have Allen Robinson in a lot of spots. I want to go back to one thing, Chris. I'll ask you first and then go back to Joe because Joe is the one that's down on the pace in that game. What about Keenan Allen? Because Keenan Allen played through an injury, had a touchdown that he dropped. I mean, I see people asking in the chat on The Athletic, like, what do I do with Keenan Allen? Should I trade him? Like he did nothing. They're like, what do you mean he's done nothing? He legitimately almost had a huge game while playing hurt. But is it just there's the pace? There's too much mix now with Hunter Henry and everybody healthy and Melvin Gordon back. Is Keenan Allen basically, I guess, has Keenan Allen lost his luster?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's Phillip Rivers. I mean, I put the blame on Rivers. I mean, this guy's really declining in a hurry. Last week was encouraging, at least 10 targets. The week before that, 11 targets. But he hasn't hit the double-digit fantasy mark in, since week 2, week 3, when he had those 3 monster games. But yeah, Henry's back. Gordon, they don't even have an identity, I feel like, on offense. So not for cash, but, you want to go a little bit off the board in tournaments. Absolutely, because Jacob had those same questions as well. And heck, Keenan Allen apologized to all you fantasy players out there last week for his poor performance. So you want to roll him out in tournaments? Sure, but not a cash game for me.
Yeah, I mean, you can always appreciate a guy that's going to at least say sorry for his fantasy production. I respect that, at least out of him. I mean, the price is nice. I guess my biggest concern, I still think that the Chargers have one of the worst offensive lines in the entire league. So, in theory, that should draw a few more targets to kind of the short area of the field. And that's just a spot where Green Bay is really strong. You can probably say that they're close to a top 5 team in the short area of the field. So, I still prefer Williams for significantly cheaper. I think there's more upside there. But the Keenan Allen, I mean, he's always going to draw ownership too. So I think that's part of it. Just like Keenan Allen, like he has that name value. You're never going to get him at like sub 5%, I don't think, in most of these tournaments. And then if you're really trying to pay up to be contrarian, that's kind of what you want to do, I think. In one of the tournaments I was in last week, someone actually got Julio Jones at like 1%. So like if there's some name value there, you really need to try and attack those situations. I think Keenan Allen's going to fall somewhere in the middle for me.
All right. Anybody else before we move on?
Not really. Not in cash. It's pretty dull week, really, for wideouts, I feel.
Well, so then I'll bring up one and go back to the matchup. Because, maybe this is why I say, is he cash? He's just tournament because of how bad the quarterback's been. But I'm going back to the Jets game. Nice. Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson, I know, look, my concern on this team is more about Jamison Crowder because he's sharing so much with Demaryius Thomas. The one thing that hasn't changed is still Robbie Anderson. And granted, this is kind of similar to the Tyler Lockett, who you brought before, Chris, is that we always concern, well, what if it's only a 4-target game? But like Tyler Lockett, he does more than most. And again, It's the Dolphins. I see you nodding along. So are you
Yeah.
on board with that, or are you still a little bit concerned because
No.
it's still
I like Robbie. I do like Robbie this week. I mean, no Xavier Howard, past DVOA, 32nd. So without the best corner. And you know what? The targets have been there, as bad as Sam Darnold has been. I mean, 22 targets in his last 3 games. They've only played 4 games together, and he has been Sam's favorite weapon to throw the football to. They've just, they've had some tough matchups. He's missed him on some throws, but yeah, this is a pretty good spot for him. In fact, it's dangerous. I kind of like that game a lot on the other side. And there's going to be some Miami wideouts I want to talk about when we get to GPP. So, I mean, I'm going to roll dice on that Miami and Jets game for sure.
And the other reason I bring him up, Chris and Joe, is because he's the 6th highest projected wide receiver right now, Robbie Anderson.
Ownership wise?
Yeah.
People are sharp. They're on it.
People just want to play guys against me on Miami no matter what.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
All right, one more before we move on. Joe, I'll ask you about it because we didn't bring his name up. The number one, do you want to guess who the number one? We haven't mentioned his name yet. Who the number one projected owner wide receiver is?
Is it Jarvis Landry at 4,500?
No, Jarvis Landry.
People are on that this week for sure. I've seen a lot of talk about Jarvis Landry.
Have you? I see. Odell Beckham's still projected higher. I'll give you the one. I'll give you a hint. He scored a touchdown in every single game with his team.
Oh, Tyrell. Oh,
there you go.
Yeah, touchdown, Tyrell.
Really?
I mean, that's another game I want a part of, right? Oakland has an identity. A lot of these teams are trying to figure out, where the offense is going to come from. It's Jacobs, it's Waller, and it's Tyrell. It's Detroit, who, again, both of these teams, I believe they're in the top 5 in terms of passing yards allowed. The total is up over 50, as I mentioned earlier. I think that's a sneaky fantasy, and it may not even be sneaky. You're talking about ownership, number 1. So, I mean, I get it.
It's an interesting one. I don't know if I would typically probably go to him. I guess last week I was looking at him as like a pivot off of my Waller shares, and I probably haven't played enough of him this year, but it's always scary to go to that offense outside of Waller. I think.
I'm laughing, Joe, because I can always tell when you're hesitant on somebody.
I know he's trying to talk himself into it. He doesn't want to say like that's a garbage play, but the volume really hasn't been there. He's obviously the touchdowns. It's like three catches and a touchdown. I mean, how long is that going to continue? So I wouldn't play him in cash, but I'm not surprised to hear he has a high ownership.
Joe really is nice cop. He just
he is
good
yeah.
cop. He is nice cop. He doesn't want to say I don't like it. He's just like,
I feel like I come at you guys enough about these running back plays. I'm sure you're going to tell me that Tevin Coleman's in play the next time he's on the main slate again, because we had our little talk about him in our Slack chat. But yeah, I don't know. I'll let you guys fire at these wide receivers. I mean, a wide receiver is a totally different position. I don't think any of these guys are out of play by any means.
Oh, no, you knew I was going to say something about Tevin Coleman, though. Come on, you have to be expecting that was maybe should I get a Tevin Coleman jersey?
I just want to. Can I hear your victory lap for your 13 touches, please, before we move on?
Yeah, 100%. Always. I'll take a victory lap on Tevin Coleman. I'll take another one tonight when he's my captain.
Oh, a little different now. I think you can project him for a lot more touch. I don't know.
I'll
give you your victory lap.
Twice this year already.
Yeah, but he doesn't catch passes, man. I'm never going to play that guy.
I know. You're never going to play that.
Let's
see. I could understand the Derrick Henry. I can't understand the Tevin Coleman hate. Let's talk tight ends, though. How about that? Darren Waller, your boy, number 1. Not a surprise.
I have a love-hate relationship with this guy, especially after last week when I basically blew up my team.
Wait, what's the hate?
Well, my hate is that I didn't play Michael Thomas in that roster construction last week in favor of just jamming in this high-priced tight end, which is, by the way, like if anyone's listening, if you're in roster construction and you're just doing everything you can to get a tight end in or get a high-priced defense in, more often than not, that's not the way you want to go in roster construction. So much can go wrong. I love the idea of having him kind of on the other side of my Houston stacks last week. But, I mean, this week in particular, I just don't know if I'm going to have the salary to get up to Waller, especially since we have some cheaper guys in play. I think the cheaper values actually are a little bit better this week than we've had in weeks past. 6,300, just the way it's shaping up, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get there. It's a much better spot this week, too, against Detroit. I think that's a team that we can historically kind of attack with the tight end. I don't know. It's tough. Travis Kelce right there, 6,900. Hunter Henry's all the way up to 6K as well. They really did kind of aggressively price these guys up. So I don't know. I think that this will probably be the week he drops another 30 or so, and I'm not there for it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind him if you can find a way, but you bring up some good points. He's the most expensive tight end over on FanDuel, but he's been pretty consistent as well. Besides last week, he did find the end zone to kind of save your day, but he really didn't return value. You're spending up for him, so it's tough. And I just kind of look at him and Henry over the past couple weeks. It's just this tight end position is just so bad. You either just hunt the position altogether and hope, a guy like Darren Fells, who's obviously not on this slate, finds the end zone, or you're just basically taking a zero. You know what I mean? Like,
really? I think we have two options.
Well, I do like Henry. I mean, he's only played, 4 games? He's got 76 yards per game. Go for it.
I think
you got.
I think it's going to be the chalkiest chalk of tight ends, but if no Delaney Walker, Jonnu Smith.
Yes, Smith has been good.
Yeah, and it's not just like, hey, do you have, like, go look at Jonnu Smith when there's no been Delaney Walker, period. And he's in that mold of the Ingrams of the world where it's just a pass catching tight end. The other one I think is really interesting, although he missed practice now too. If OJ Howard's out again, you go back to Cameron Brate. Obviously it's not. I would go Jonnu before I went Brate, but if OJ Howard's out again, the one thing we know about Seattle, play your tight ends against them.
Yeah, it's not a bad call. He wasn't great last week, but he had 6 targets. It was a season high for him. I do like Jonnu. Jonnu's good, too. Like, after the catch, he's pretty explosive, and it seems like Ryan Tannehill is going his way. I mean, he's got 10 targets and 9 grabs in his last 2 games and, over 130 yards in those 2 games of Tannehill. So I think he's probably the safest option in that Tennessee, offense. It's not great. One guy I do like this week, actually, especially on DK, and I don't know if I'll go there in cash, is Zach Ertz. I mean, at $4,700, and people are starting to talk about Dallas Goedert over him, and Ertz is still top 5 in terms of just red zone targets. Looks like Deshaun Jackson's going to be back this week. I think that helps out Carson Wentz and the entire offense. Yeah, I mean, I was at that Buffalo game last week, and they double teamed Ertz almost every single time, and you saw Goddard get in the end zone with a red zone touchdown. I think that definitely is going to open up the offense a little bit. I kind of like Carson Wentz too, and get to GPP quarterbacks. Ertz at $4,700. Nobody likes. What's his projected ownership? I bet you Goddard is higher than him.
Goddard. Oh yeah, Goddard's higher. Goddard's inside the top 10. Ertz is down by, I think, around 15. I switched over to the quarterbacks already.
Among tight ends. My goodness.
Joe, your thoughts on tight ends? And real quick before you do, breaking news for everybody out there. Benny Snell's out at least 2 to 3 weeks. So if Connor's out, Jalen Samuels has very little competition because it's Trey Edmonds with a U. For everybody that keeps spelling Chase Edmonds wrong, there's the Edmonds you want. That's the Edmonds you're supposed to be. So when you put Edmonds, now I'm going to start answering as if it's Trey. But anyway, go ahead, Joe. What are your thoughts on these tight ends, including Zach Ertz, with or without Deshaun Jackson?
Yeah, I actually really like the Ertz call. He's 4,700, so that's a spot where I think you can kind of just take the volume there. Like, if we're just looking at something like his target share, like, he's pretty similar as far as over the last 4 games to someone like Ertz, to someone like Waller or Henry. So I really like that call, especially at that price point. I'm not really on Cameron Brate. I wasn't going to play him last week over someone like Jonnu. I know that this team just doesn't want to throw the tight end a ton anyway, but even last week, I don't know, he played 70% of the snaps, which was fine, but 10% target share. Like, I think he has a red zone role, and that's not going to change, but it's still feels more touchdown dependent than Jonnu, who's going to kind of walk into the Delaney Walker role if we get that again. I think I prefer that. And I do think he's a talented guy after the catch, like you mentioned. Have another guy as well, significantly cheaper. It's a brutal total, but I brought him up plenty of times this year, but I still think that there's going to be a Noah Fant game at some point. He's 3K.
I was waiting for it.
He's 3K. I actually think that this week he probably makes more sense than other weeks where I've brought him up. Now that we don't have any Emmanuel Sanders, like there's a target share there that I think is up for grabs, and I think that Noah Fant could be a guy that, like, these tight ends for rookies, they take a while to get going, but he did have 9 targets last week. Didn't do a whole lot with them, but he played a ton of snaps. I think that he is at 3K if you wanted to pay all the way down and get a little bit different from these other guys. Maybe not in cash. Probably should have saved him for GPPs, but I wanted to make sure that I mentioned him.
Brandon Allen to Noah Fant, 7K. Look at all the money you save. Oh, baby.
Oh, my God. Don't do it. Please don't do it, Joe. Just give me your lineup instead. Let me be your entry.
Well, now quarterback. Now I got to put him on my FanDuel team.
Do it. Get him in there.
So I'm going to go Joe first. You both get the guess. Joe first. You get the first crack at it. The number 1 projected owned quarterback currently. That's
Matthew Stafford.
It's got to be Russell Wilson.
I said Joe first. You jumped the gun.
I'm bad cop.
That's got to be Russell Wilson, right?
You're both wrong. So Stafford's number 2. Russell Wilson is 5. You're both wrong. I'll give you both one more shot.
That seems wrong.
It does seem wrong.
Just seems wrong. I don't really have another take. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Russell Wilson.
No, this is why we do the show. I mean,
Aaron Rodgers.
No, Aaron Rodgers is 7th. You got one more shot, Joe.
Oh, man.
I don't have a take. It's Russell Wilson to me.
I love that. No, there's no.
Derek Carr.
The number one currently projected owned quarterback is Jameis Winston.
No.
Look at Joe shaking his head.
No chance.
Yeah, no chance. Wrong, incorrect. There's
Just
no
wrong.
chance.
Sorry.
Disgusting. I don't mind Jameis, but I mean, I'm not. If that's going to be the case, like, I'll just move away.
Well,
We're going to win a lot
here,
of money
Chris.
this week if that's the case.
Yeah.
Chris, I'll go to you first on this. You seem a little bit happier to talk about this than Joe, the bad cop over there. So, Jameis, I'm going to tie it in. We're about to talk tournaments. So, one, you said no chance in cash. And I'm assuming if he's going to be the number one projected quarterback, there's no chance in tournaments either because there goes all the upside because he's turnover machine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we all know what Jameis is in terms of real life football, but in fantasy, I never really mind him because, he has those two weapons and the run game we talked about, and plus his defense is so poor, but I'm not going to play Jameis at the highest projected ownership. There's no way. I mean, I'll just spend down or spend up for Russell Wilson. I mean, I think that's kind of the play. And Chris Carson's in a tough spot against that Tampa Bay run defense. So I'm shocked actually to see that it is Russell Wilson. But I guess if you are trying to paint a script in your head where Russell Wilson and the Seahawks have their way, and Winston has to throw the football with these two weapons, he does have two top five fantasy wideouts. But I'm not going to play chalk Winston. No thanks.
I'm so confused. I just don't get it. What am I missing here? I'm like literally piecing my way through the Jameis Winston play, like trying to figure out what people are doing. If that's the case, I don't understand. You guys can.
All right, so you make your case for Russell Wilson, but if you give us another option, if you can't and don't want to pay up for something, because I think that there's conceivably no way you can do Wilson McCaffrey. I mean, that's just
it'd be very tough.
Yeah, it's pretty tough.
Yeah, so Russ, I mean, 7,100, he's expensive, right? I'd be shocked if he doesn't be the guy that's like approaching like that 20% marker. So, but yeah, I mean, I like this game quite a bit against Tampa Bay. I think it's one of those ones that we can project for kind of a higher pace for sure. It is one of the higher team totals. Massive pass funnel, like for all the same reasons we've been targeting Tampa Bay with quarterbacks. I think Russ makes a lot of sense. They're a team that can be beat deep, so I like that because Russ has been throwing deep this year. He's like third in yards per attempt on the slate. He's going to give us some rushing ability too. I mean, I've got him projected without a lot of running quarterbacks on this slate. Like, I have a hard time thinking that people aren't going to be on Russell Wilson, even at that price point. So I think he's interesting. If you didn't go there, I'm kind of on just like paying all the way down potentially for some Fitzmagic action. I actually think he's interesting against the Jets. Someone that hopefully we see some points in this game, which I'm not quite sure about. But he's not scared to throw far down the field. I mean, the Jets can be beat pretty much all over. He's got a revenge game with basically every team in the NFL at this point, right? So I think Fitz is fine. He's someone that hopefully will give us a little bit on the ground as well. So 4,800, I think paying all the way down is almost always in play at this position. So those are the guys I'm looking at.
If you were on the 3 screen and people were watching the video, you saw my reaction. You took my guy. I'm
That was
all
your
over
guy?
Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, like Fitz too, 3 for 3.
And that was going to be the pay down if I wanted to try. Well, I do have Dalvin Cook in one of my lineups. Is just pay down. I'm not going to pay down for Brandon Allen. I know you were saying that tongue in cheek, Chris, but like Fitzpatrick, like you said, Fitzpatrick is Jameis Winston at a severely discounted price. Like that's just.
Are you
really
sure you
what it
didn't
comes
mix
down
up that ownership?
I'm looking at it. Yes, Fitzpatrick is actually 3, 6, 7, 8, right behind Rodgers, in front of Matt Moore and Mitch Trubisky. Which, by the way, let me bring up the third one for you, Chris. We talked about Tyrell. Derek Carr has been better than people realize. Like that, I'll say it. I'll leave it at that. We also know that Derek Carr doesn't really have the ceiling of most, but we are talking cash. We're talking about 5,500 on DraftKings and 7,300. Not great, not as great of a price on FanDuel, but for that price, any consideration for that?
Let me tell you about this guy named Derek Carr, man. Yeah, good matchup. Again, high total. Like that game a lot. If I think a lot of people will look at Stafford, but yeah, if you like Waller and you like Tyrell, I mean, I think Derek Carr does make some sense at $5,500. I mean, Detroit has allowed the most passing yards so far this season, like per game. So I think that's a good spot. I just love the Fitz call too. I mean, that's kind of why I brought up Chubb last week, is because there's some weapons. He's going to have to throw the ball, and I like to spend down at the quarterback position. I don't really like to strap myself. I love Russell Wilson. Like, it all makes total sense to plug in Russell Wilson, but you're going to save yourself, over 2K at the quarterback position is going to allow you to really spend up. So I won't fully go with Carr. I like it. It's okay. I do like Wentz in that range as well, but yeah, if I'm going to go in that price, I'll actually just spend down for Fitz, and I kind of like both of his weapons too. And definitely Devante Parker.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up. If you're going down that low, why not just keep going?
Yeah, pair him up.
You guys, real quick. So I also wanted you to explain one of those paintings behind you, Chris. Like, you said you're in a hotel room. Like, is that a skull? Is that a skull with a hat on a phone? Like, what is that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a dude with a scarf around his face.
Is it a dude or is it like a skull person from like New Orleans?
No, it's a dude. Yeah,
I'm sorry,
Vegas
New Orleans.
Today. I'm in Vegas today. There's a couple. I don't know if you can see the other one. Got a little girl there. It looks like she's showing a little skin, but the guy there behind me is also showing some skin. So yeah, some weird paintings.
There you go. This is what happens when you travel with Chris. You're traveling, man. I was gonna say, do you guys want to guess who's by far the lowest projected owned quarterback? I'm not even gonna let you guess. Kirk Cousins against the Chiefs.
Ooh,
I was gonna say Case
nobody
Keenum.
wants Kirk Cousins. So
Wow.
I bring that up because let's talk some tournaments.
You down with GPP?
Joe, Kirk Cousins, Chris, Kirk Cousins, tournament style. Is this where he's in play? I mean, do we stack if Adam Thielen's back, potentially the two receivers and Kirk Cousins, or are people deservedly hesitant because it's a run against the Chiefs to beat them? You don't necessarily need to pass too much.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, Cook, I feel like he probably will at the end of the day. You're playing in big tournaments. He's probably going to have the highest ownership, and I'm all about Cook too. But if you're going to maybe fade him in one lineup, I think it does make sense to play Kirk Cousins. That maybe it is a Kirk Cousins and Thielen and Diggs game against Kansas City. It's very possible. I know the Chiefs they've certainly dialed up some pressure lately and getting after the quarterback. Everyone saw Kirk Cousins against Washington on primetime Thursday Night Football. He was efficient, but he didn't do a whole lot, and he's had some of those games so far this season. So I got him written up in the DFS pass under GPP options. I think you can get by. He's not one of my favorite options, but it does make sense if you're going to fade Cook in one.
You guys saw his price, right? 6,700.
Yeah,
I think that's what. I don't know. That's a really tough price tag for him, isn't it? I don't know. He's so expensive.
That's why I think that's why people
tournament
are
play.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So you're completely off even in tournaments, right?
Yeah, for sure. He's like not in my pool, but if you want to play a large field, and I think what you said about Dalvin Cook, like it definitely holds some weight. Like if he's going to be one of the higher guys on the entire slate, just pivoting to Cousins would make some sense, especially because of that price tag. Because would not be shocking to see him be like sub 5% owned. So I'm at the on large field stuff.
All right. So before we move to running back, Joe, stick with you. The two deepest quarterbacks down by 1%. Deservedly so for one of them is Baker Mayfield and that matchup. The other one, though, is Jacoby Brissett, who's been pretty dang efficient this year, although has started to fall back of recent. Either of those tournament appeal for you, or just why even bother?
Yeah, I don't know if I have like a really strong take for either of those guys. I think that Jacoby Brissett would be a guy that if you got him at super low ownership against Pittsburgh, like this Pittsburgh team, I think they're kind of really struggling without some of their studs. We've seen what's happened with Juju this year, so I think that he's fine. I haven't really been on kind of the Cleveland train much at all this year, outside of the 1 week I played Odell Beckham, but Denver wouldn't be a spot that I would be, I guess, rushing to play Baker Mayfield. So I think that would be a tougher one. I mean, I know what Chris mentioned it before, but I got to make sure that everyone knows my love for Josh Allen is still very real as well. I think that in tournaments, he's a guy that we could go to if he's going to be lower owned, stack him up with John Brown, but also I think Cole Beasley is in a really awesome spot too, which I'll save him for when we get to wide receivers.
Anything to add, Chris? Or
Allen is interesting. It's kind of like the Lamar Jackson thing. Obviously, he doesn't have that same type of ceiling, but I mean, he only threw 169 yards last week. He still has 17 fantasy points. It's a number he's hit in 6 of 7 starts. I like him a little bit more in cash because I just don't really quite know where his ceiling is, even though he is decent spot against Washington for sure. I'll go back to Carson Wentz. I actually think this could be a Carson Wentz game if Deshaun Jackson is rolled in there, and his price is decent over on DK. He's in there 5.7. You see that little red 7 there. But, you look at Chicago in terms of just quarterbacks they played. Rivers last week didn't look good. Bridgewater, Carr, Keenum, Joe Flacco. I mean, they haven't faced a lot of good quarterbacks, and Carson Wentz has only had Deshaun Jackson once so far this year, and he, 150 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 8 catches. So I think it just opens up the entire offense. I think Alshon could have a decent day. Miles Sanders is catching balls out of the backfield as well. So I like Wentz as a tournament option. I don't think anybody's going to be on him either.
All right. I like it too. I actually am with you with that as long as Deshaun Jackson is out there.
Yeah, so Deshaun's the key.
Yeah. Let's move to running back. Chris, your boy, And your namesake over here, Chris Carson, he gets the vaunted Buccaneers. And it's legitimately the vaunted Buccaneers run defense. Look at who they faced. They've given up touchdowns to, I think, 2 running backs on the season, and 2 of those are among the elite, and they were still low yardage days. Only one person even over 100, and that's combined yards against them receiving. So is Chris Carson a potential tournament? Because I'm looking right now. Projected ownership, deservedly so. It's in the basement.
Yeah, it is in the basement. Very high price tag on FanDuel, where he doesn't catch a ton of balls. He does have, I think, 3 games with at least 4, but I'm not into him this week. Maybe that's a mistake, but it's just this defense. I have a ton of respect for them. If they're able to shut down Chris McCaffrey, I think they're going to have a decent day against Chris Carson. He could fall into the end zone if Seattle does get up in this game. You lean on him. He's probably going to get his 20 carries like he gets every single week. The volume's going to be there, but it's a really tough spot for him. I'm kind of fading him this week.
All right, maybe what's the pick before we go to you, Joe, that you do like?
Well, a lot of different backs. Have we talked about Chubb at all? We kind of just glossed over him. He fumbled twice, but he's got 20 carries in back-to-back games, at least 20 in 4 of his past 5, and 253 rushing yards in his last 2 contests. So he's averaging over 100 on the year. He's been pretty good, and Baker Mayfield has not been good. So I think that the game plan for Cleveland is just to kind of hand it off to Nick Chubb.
Let me ask you a follow-up, and I'm going to ask the same question to you, Joe, when we come to you. So Nick Chubb is 7th in ownership. Because running back is what running back is maybe playing tournaments not necessarily something we should worry too much when it comes to running back, just because, as Joe always says, the reason he was joking about Tevin Coleman is because it's volume. You don't want the guy, you don't want Royce Freeman and Philip Lindsay, and especially the tournament, because even if Philip Lindsay scores 2 touchdowns, it's still probably not going to be a game breaker because he might only have 40 yards with those 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't really I do look at ownerships. I'm not going to avoid them, but for running backs, I don't really, to be honest with you. I'm looking at volume. I'm looking at bell cow backs, and Chubb is one of those guys right now. He's got one more game here before we start talking about Kareem Hunt. But he's catching some balls out of the backfield. He's 3 catches in 5 of his 7 games. So he's the goal line guy. He's the guy who's on the field. He's going to catch balls. So you just plug him in as a guy who's going to touch the ball 20, maybe 25 times every week.
Yeah, I think that he's still totally in play. I think you've kind of taken all of my guys, which I guess isn't too surprising since we've gone through kind of all the top volume guys. But I love Chubb this week. If he's going to be lower owned, I think that's the piece of the offense that I would definitely take a shot on. We talked about Bell, like a little bit of recency bias with Le'Veon in a great spot. So I think that he's another guy, depending on how things shake out with ownership, that would make a lot of sense. But outside of that, maybe just at some point paying up to be a little bit contrarian for Christian McCaffrey. We'll see how kind of the week progresses. It looks like people are back on him, so I think those are probably the guys I'd be on too.
Wait, you guys aren't with this is the first week I could ever call him my guy? You guys aren't Aaron Jones? Really?
Oh, we talked about him. You think he's going to be low owned?
According to right now, he is. Right now, he's down by Jordan Howard and Mark Walton.
Oh, he's a great tournament play then. I'm with you.
Why?
I don't know. I could not tell you. I really and his price. His price went up 200 and 100 to 7,000 and 7,700. It wasn't like it jumped up into the 8,000 range for both. All right, so this is your heyday here, Joe. Wide receivers.
Yeah, so wide receiver, I think there's a couple of guys that make a lot of sense, but in order to kind of get up to some of these running backs we're talking about, we're going to have to find some savings. So I'm kind of going back to, if I'm going to kind of tout this kind of Fitzmagic game, I think that Preston Williams is the guy that I prefer going to in that spot. He's still a guy that's top 20 in weighted opportunity over the last 4 weeks. He's someone that hasn't quite gotten there, but he is kind of seeing those deeper targets. If you get him at lower ownership in this spot, I think it's great, especially because the Jets are the 4th worst team at defending the deep pass. So I think that he's interesting. We'll see kind of what the ownership ends up being like on Preston Williams, but he's like one of those guys that I think if I'm paying down, that's like the lowest I've gotten so far. I don't see anyone below 4K that I love this week.
Yeah, I don't either. Really, I don't want to roll the dice with Lazard, even though he has been getting some volume. I just don't really want to go there. We already poured one out on the throwback for Bayshawn Hamilton, so I'm not going to go there either. Sticking with that same game, I have way too many Dolphins and Jets in my lineup. So like, what the heck?
Yeah, it's scary.
But Devante Parker is a guy that I like too. 18 targets, 11 grabs, 114 yards his last 2 games. He has at least 50 yards in 5 games this season. He's got 3 TDs in his last 4. I like the Williams call. I like the Parker call. Both of those guys, like 42 and 44 in good spots. I'm going to have a lot of exposure to both of them, unfortunately.
Yeah, Preston Williams, Devante Parker are both inside the top 20 for projected ownership, which isn't surprising. I'll give you one. Wait, I just want to make sure. Yeah, let's just see if we had any updated injury news. Still waiting on it, but I think that a lot of people are going to assume it's just a one-game fluke type of thing. But if D.D. Westbrook's still banged up and even out, Chris Conley, all day. Like, because everybody's going to go right to DJ Chark, deservedly so. But if you're going to get involved in that game with my man Beowulf over here, it's,
that's on the London slate though, right? You have to you go on a full slate, I think, to get involved with him. But you're right to bring him up.
Yeah, you can get the full slate still on DraftKings, right?
Yeah. You're right to bring him up because he's been trending. He's getting a lot of targets lately.
Yeah, I was just looking at it because this has the full slate for including the London game, and he's still down by looks like the AJ Brown of the world. Which AJ Brown, are we completely? Like, I will bring him up. That's the last one I'll bring up. Or Corey Davis, your boy, Chris. Corey Davis, AJ Brown.
Now.
Well, no.
It's a tough.
Are they legitimate tournament plays? Because this is recency biased in its truest form. They are way off the charts. Nobody wants a piece of them after what happened last week.
Yeah, it's typical, right? Nobody wanted him 2 weeks ago with the Tannehill change. He has the good game, and all of a sudden everyone wants him. I think we were right to. Tannehill was fine, but I think we were right to, for the most part. I got suckered into it, but I didn't have full exposure with Corey Davis because this is kind of what he does, and he's been hot and cold. But yeah, if you're looking for the ultra contrarian, some value at the wide receiver position, sure. He still had 6 targets. He just Tannehill didn't really hook up with them, so I don't mind it, but I'm kind of really just avoiding that entire game in general.
Yeah, I think that the defense is the play that I really like in that game still. So I'm not so much on Corey Davis or the passing game. I talked about Tannehill quite a bit last week on just like if he was going to see pressure, it worries me a little bit. Last week he didn't see as much, but he's probably one of the worst quarterbacks on the slate if you're just looking at his yards per attempt while under pressure versus when he's got a clean pocket. So that worries me against a team like Carolina that we know can get to the quarterback. So if anything, I'm just on the Carolina defense on this game.
All right, then before we get to defenses, let's talk tight ends. Is there legitimately, Joe, this is a question, Chris is shaking your head. You know the question I'm going to ask. Is there anybody that we not bring up that's tournament playable?
At tight end?
Because you already mentioned Fant, so
that's what I mean. Like, what do you want from me right now? If I've already talked about Noah Fant, no,
I'll give you one. He's higher
Griffin.
than No, I don't want him. I'm just saying I find it interesting. The one that we didn't bring up is T.J. Hawkinson, and that was the one I was going to bring up. Like we've joked about his hands. He should have more production on to date, which his hands were never really that big of a concern in college. I just find it interesting that 2 spots in projected ownership in front of him is Jacob Hollister for the freaking Seahawks. Like,
goodness.
Like, are we really just like, Bucks, let me plug somebody in?
I don't hate the Hawkinson call, to be honest. Like, it's a pretty good matchup for him.
Hulkinson,
yeah.
Hulkinson.
He's running some routes. It's the same thing with these guys. It's like he only had 1 target last week, so can we really go back to that? But from a tournament perspective, yeah, I think these rookie running backs, these rookie tight ends, they could have some fluctuation between big games and then nothing, big games and nothing. So I think he's fine at that price. He makes some sense.
No, real quick before you go to hold on. Chris, real quick, I want to address the Hawkinson thing. Is this so? What has changed course this year? The Giants, to your point, Joe, the Giants have been sneaky good against tight ends this year. All of a sudden,
yeah. What has happened there?
I don't know because they still don't have any.
It's been like 5 years where you could just plug in anybody.
They've never addressed linebacker. I think it just honestly, let's talk. Kidding aside, if you look at the Giants, this is the second year now they've been moved to a 3-4. That's immediately going to inherently clog up that area of the field a little bit more. If you look at their safeties and the strength of their safeties is in shorter, is in getting after the rush. So I think if you just look at their team makeup with Jabril Peppers now there, that's the area of the field where their defense, and you've seen them exploitable against the pass, even with Janoris Jenkins deep outside, speedy guys, all that middle of the field. It's just, I think there's just a bunch of dudes running around and they're slow and they're just clogging things up, honestly.
Give them some credit. They finally figured out over the past few years.
Put a bunch of unathletic guys over the middle of the field. You'll stop tight ends.
It used to just be automatic. Whoever played the Giants, you just plug in whatever tight end. It didn't really matter, and they were just going to find the end zone. I brought up Griffin. Maybe we've talked too much about the Jets in Miami, but if Herndon doesn't play, Griffin, yeah, you're right. But Griffin did, a couple touchdowns, some catches. I'm really intrigued with Herndon. I don't know if I'll go there if he does play. He could potentially be limited. It's somebody that I think I'll talk about in the future because like him and Sam Darnold were pretty solid down the stretch last year. But yeah, throwing out tight ends, I mean, maybe Griffin at 34.
Ryan Griffin is flying knee for the touchdown last week. All right.
Yeah.
So let's talk defenses. You know what? I've been kind of letting you guys do a whole lot today, so I've been saving this one, and I just want to jump in because I want you guys to laugh at me because I need to be in a better mood after today. Hey, I'm going to Notre Dame this week, and I don't have to wear. That's why I'm wearing the Notre Dame hat and Notre Dame T-shirt. This is my first ever trip to Notre Dame. Oh, I'm super pumped. I am a little bittersweet because they lost last week, but I look at it this way, Chris. Now I don't have to get stressed out if they're somehow blowing a game against Virginia Tech because they're already out of the equation. So now I can just go and enjoy the experience. But I say all that so you can laugh at me because defense-wise, this is where I'm paying down, and I'm taking your method, Chris. I am paying down to the utmost 100 emoji degree. The Redskins defense against turnover-prone Josh Allen. The Redskins defense generates pass rush. Josh Allen is going to turn the ball over. They are going to give up points, but I'm just paying down because you know what? If I get 6 or 7 points from my defense, paying $1,900, I think it's kind of worthwhile doing. So
I like it.
Me too.
I'm not gonna laugh at you. No, they're written up in the DFS pass. And you look at some of the points. I mean, 6 points against.
Hey, how do you save 10% on the DFS
podcast,
pass,
baby? Podcast. 6 points against Minnie, 8 against San Fran, 10 against Miami, whatever. But 5 against New England. If they can get 5 fantasy points against New England, I'm sure that they can get 5 points against Josh Allen. You're dead on. Allen has been turning the ball over. He almost has more picks than touchdowns. Again, fumbling last week I think on the 20, turned that whole game around against the Eagles. So he can't take care of the football, and I like the call. We've talked about this.
I actually overpriced him by $100. It's $1,800.
Yeah, $1,800. It allows you to do a whole lot, and I don't feel like they'll give you a minus. And I think we said this a couple weeks ago when the Jets played. I forget who they were playing, and they were $1,500. It may have been with
the Patriots, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, I think it was against Dallas potentially, and I think they had like 3 or 4 points, but it didn't matter because you were able to spend up. If those guys that you spend up on hit, then you're perfectly fine. There's a lot of different ways to go this week with defense. It's very interesting, but I do like that call, Jay.
All right, Joe. Yeah, you like it too?
Yeah, it's great. And by the way, Chris is fired up. We should get him to Vegas every week. This is great.
Man. Yeah.
I like the call quite a bit, especially the price attacking a guy that's definitely going to take some sacks. I'm with you on that. I think that both sides of that game make sense from a defensive perspective this week, so I got no issues with that. I think the kind of the clear pay up option to me is still Carolina, but they're still only 2,800, so the difference in price there, if you have it, I think that's still the one that I would prefer. But yeah, Washington's getting pressure. I got no issues with that, man. I think that's a really sharp play.
So what else? Where else are you looking, Joe? You want to know what the 4th highest owned? I'm surprised it's not number 1 because people saw Brandon Allen and it was boom, putting the Browns defense everywhere, even seasonal.
Yeah, I think the Browns are pretty interesting. I struggle with these ones where they just go on the road to a tough environment. But I mean, yeah, it doesn't get much better from kind of a quarterback perspective that you're targeting. So I'm in on that. I don't know as far as the pressure rate. I think that they're probably okay. I think that this is a week where we have some really great options facing poor offensive lines, and you've already mentioned a couple of them. So I think that in tournaments, yeah, I think that would be one. But if the ownership gets out of control, I think I still prefer the other ones we talked about.
Well, one more, and you can answer the same question, Chris, because I'm asking both of you guys about this defense. You just said poor offensive lines, and if you want to talk about a game which is essentially a home game for this team, because that's what teams coming to the stadium are, home teams, Green Bay Packers against the Chargers. The Packers are going to have to they're going to end up forcing the Chargers to pass to keep up in this game, with or without Devante Adams. We know that. Phillip Rivers doesn't have his time to even think and drop back at times. It is essentially a home game for the Packers, Joe.
I love it, and that was one of the ones that I was considering bringing up just because of what you just said. The Chargers probably have a bottom 3 offensive line at this point. They've been horrendous. You're going to get passing volume on the other side with Rivers, so I like that. He hasn't been someone that's been taking a ton of sacks, at least most recently, but Green Bay is one of the pressure teams that we have on the slate. The ownership I'm looking at looks like Green Bay is going to be really contrarian, so if that's the case, I think that would be a really interesting one. It could have something to do with price, $3,400 on DraftKings, on FanDuel. They're pretty expensive as well, I believe. So they're only $4,200 on FanDuel, so middle of the pack, but I think that if they're going to be that low owned, that'd be a nice one for tournaments.
Yeah, I like that call as well. I think most people will just automatically go Broncos, Jets, try to get in the Bills or Seahawks. So I think, Packers getting them at $3,400 is pretty contrarian as well. I do like Cleveland. I mean, they've dialed up just 3 sacks per game. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it's 6th on this slate. So it's not bad. And we already mentioned Brian Allen. Thanks.
Anybody else you want to throw out before we talk about our stacks and
I
lineups?
think that's good for me.
Yeah, not really.
All right, so let's do it. Let's talk stacks.
Stack attack.
We kind of have hit on all of them, so we don't have to spend a whole lot of time. Is there a stack that you find particularly appealing this week? Is it it kind of almost, do I want to say your Eagles?
Yeah, you guys are. I do like the Eagles this week. Sure, let's go there. We'll save Seattle for Joe. Yeah, I do like Deshaun if he's going to play. I think Wentz is going to take some deep shots with him, and we saw it the second throw of the game, these two together in week 1. He took some deep shots. So if you want to go Jackson to Wentz or even Ertz, I think I really feel like this is going to be an Ertz game. So either all three or one of the two.
Yeah, I think we should probably talk a little bit more about Seattle because I think that's one of the better spots on the slate when he is definitely higher owned than Winston, by the way. So Russell Wilson, I'm going to go with him, but I'm going to bring it with DK Metcalf. I think that he's the guy for the salary that makes more sense to me. I think Tyler Lockett, if you wanted to add him to that stack, I have no issue whatsoever. If you want to completely game stack it, like I mentioned, I think it's still Mike Evans for me on the other side of this, but probably only bringing one guy back from Tampa Bay, like Jake was mentioning earlier. So I'll go with the Seattle stack. I'll go a little bit chalky on this one.